The cleanest yard on the block is often the least useful one. It drinks money, it drinks water, it drinks time, and all the while, the toughest, most dependable food on the property is getting sprayed, mowed, bagged, and hauled off like trash. That is the irony I want you to sit with today, because a lot of what we call weeds are not failures. They are survivors. They are the first plants to answer when the soil is compacted, the weather turns dry, the bed gets neglected, or the lawn gets thin. They do not ask for perfect timing. They do not ask for premium compost. They do not ask for irrigation every other morning. They do not sulk when July turns mean. They are the exact opposite of the fragile lawn ideal. And that matters now more than ever, because the modern yard is often a high-input machine that gives very little back. You pay for seed, you pay for fertilizer, you pay for herbicide, you pay for fuel, you pay for a mower, you pay for water. Then you keep paying to defend a green surface that cannot feed you, cannot meaningfully enrich your pantry, and usually cannot survive stress without help. Meanwhile, dandelion, purslane, lamb's quarters, wood sorrel, clover, and chickweed are already out there doing what resilient plants do. They are covering ground. They are finding moisture. They are building biomass. They are feeding pollinators. And in many cases, they are offering better nutrition than the vegetables people pay good money to grow. That is zero-input survival. Free food, self-reseeding plants, strong nutrition, reliable return, no truck delivering amendments. No panic because the garden center ran out of what you thought you needed. Just a living system that already knows how to survive your weather, your soil, and your occasional neglect. Now, I want to be careful and honest here, because this is where common sense matters. Not every weed is edible. Not every edible plant is good for every person in every amount. And not every patch of ground is safe to harvest from. So the first rule is simple. Identify beyond doubt. If you do not know the plant, leave it alone. A guess is not good enough. A half memory is not good enough. Use a field guide. Use a reliable plant identification source. Compare leaf shape, stem, flower, growth habit, and season. If one detail does not match, stop right there. The second rule matters just as much. Do not harvest from contaminated ground. That means roadside edges with runoff, ditch banks, industrial lots, and lawns that may have been sprayed with herbicide. It also means places where pets use the ground heavily. A free plant is not a bargain if the soil under it is dirty. The third rule is moderation. Start small, taste a little, learn the plant, learn how you like it, learn how your body handles it. These are foods. Some are powerful foods, but they are not magic, and they are not an excuse to throw caution out the window. Now let me show you 6 wild plants I would learn first if I wanted a backyard system that could feed me with almost no input at all. The first one is the plant most people have been taught to hate since childhood, dandelion. If you have a dandelion problem, you may also have a dinner problem you are ignoring. That plant is one of the most useful volunteers in the yard. It is rich in vitamin K, loaded with beta-carotene, and surprisingly strong on calcium for something people treat like a nuisance. And the important thing is not just the nutrition on paper. It is the structure of the plant. Every part has a use. The young leaves go into salads or cooked greens. The flowers can be dipped in batter and fried, folded into pancakes, or steeped into syrup. The root can be dried, roasted, and brewed into a dark, bitter drink that reminds a lot of people of coffee. Not identical, of course, but close enough to scratch the itch, especially if you are trying to cut cost or stretch supplies. The leaves are where most people make the first mistake. They wait too long. They let the plant get big, tall, and fully mature. Then they try one leaf in late spring, make a face, and decide dandelion is only for rabbits. Well, mature dandelion is bitter, that is true, but young dandelion is a very different plant on the plate. If you want the best eating, take the youngest leaves from the center of the rosette, before the flower stalk shoots up. Those are tender, less bitter, and much easier to mix with milder greens. I like to pair them with lettuce if I have it, or with chickweed if it is still around in spring. If you want to soften the flavor even more, Blanch them for about a minute, drain them, and dress them with a little oil, vinegar, and salt. The bitterness settles down, and the plant tastes like it belongs there. Here is what surprises people. Dandelion is not one harvest. It is 3. You get greens first, then flowers, then roots. That makes it a staggered food source, and that matters in a survival frame. You are not depending on one narrow window. You are taking value from the same plant across the season. The flowers are more useful than most people realize. Pick them when they are fully open and bright, not tired, not half-closed, fresh. You can separate the petals and stir them into batter, or fry the whole heads after a quick rinse. Some people make jelly or syrup from them. The flavor is mild, slightly floral, a little honey-like if you catch them at the right stage. A neighbor of mine used to collect a bowl of them with her grandchildren every spring. By evening, she had fritters on the table, and the children stopped seeing the lawn as a place to sterilize and started seeing it as a place to gather food. That shift matters. The root takes a little more work, but it brings a different kind of value. Dig it in fall, after the plant has pushed energy back underground. That is when the root is thickest and richest. Wash it well. Slice it into small pieces. And dandelion does something else people miss. Its taproot reaches down where shallow-rooted grasses do not. It works into compacted ground. It brings up minerals from deeper layers. That does not mean you let it take every bed over dot. Roast it low and slow until it turns brown and fragrant. Then grind it and brew it. The smell is deep, earthy, and warm. If coffee is expensive, or you simply want a homegrown substitute for part of your cup, that is a useful skill. And dandelion does something else people miss. Its taproot reaches down where shallow-rooted grasses do not. It works into compacted ground. It brings up minerals from deeper layers. That does not mean you let it take every bed over. It means you understand the job it is doing before you declare war on it. The common mistake with dandelion is treating all plants and all stages the same. They are not. Young leaves for fresh eating, flowers when open, roots in fall. If you harvest with timing, the plant rewards you. If you ignore timing, it punishes you with bitterness and stringy texture. And if bending or kneeling is hard on you, there is an easy modification. Use a long-handled weeder, a narrow transplant spade, or even a hori-hori knife with a longer grip. You do not need to wrestle roots bare-handed on your knees. A lot of backyard gardeners are working with stiff backs, replaced hips, or knees that are not what they used to be. The garden has to fit the body you actually have. The cost note here is almost laughable. Dandelion costs nothing. It arrives on its own. It reseeds on its own. It survives poor soil, foot traffic, and a lot of abuse. The expensive part is not learning to use it. The expensive part is buying products to kill it, then buying salad greens and coffee substitutes from somewhere else. The second plant is the one that makes me smile every hot summer. Purslane. Most people do not know its name. They just know they keep seeing it. It creeps low. It has smooth, fleshy leaves. The stems often have a reddish cast. And because it stays close to the ground, people assume it is weak or worthless. That is a mistake. Purslane is one of the smartest hot weather edibles in the yard. Those thick stems and leaves are not just a quirk, they are storage. The plant holds water inside itself, and it uses an efficient photosynthesis pathway that helps it keep going in heat and drought when more delicate greens fold up and quit. In plain English, it is built for hard weather. That is why purslane thrives when lettuce turns bitter, spinach bolts, and many gardeners start complaining that summer is too much trouble. What makes it really special is nutrition. Purslane is one of the rare land plants known for meaningful omega-3 fatty acids. That is unusual enough to deserve attention. A lot of people think of omega-3 as something that only comes from fish or capsules. Then this little plant shows up between stepping stones and says otherwise. It also gives you vitamin C, vitamin A, and useful minerals. But the omega-3 point is what gets people's attention because it is so unexpected. The easiest way to use purslane is to stop overthinking it. Take the tender stems and leaves, rinse them well, then either chop them raw into salad, fold them into salsa, or saute them lightly with garlic and oil. You can also add them near the end of soup so they keep some texture. And the texture is the surprise. Purslane is crisp, juicy, slightly tart, almost cooling. It does not eat like spinach, and it does not cook down the same way. It feels like a plant that stored water all afternoon and saved some for you. One summer, during a long dry stretch, I watched a friend's cucumbers stall, his beans sulk, and his lettuce burn out completely. But purslane was spreading cheerfully under the tomato cages as if nothing had happened. That is not a small detail. That is a lesson in plant character. The common mistake with purslane is either pulling it too soon or treating it like a needy crop. It is neither. You do not need to pamper it. In fact, overloving it usually misses the point. This is a survival food because it thrives where the conditions are rough. If you get rain and heat, it is happy. If the soil is only average, it is still happy. If you ignore it for a few days, it does not hold a grudge. If you want a zero-input patch, purslane belongs there. Let it trail along bed edges. Let it occupy bare strips that would otherwise crust over and crack. Harvest what you want and leave the rest to regrow. And here is the unexpected trick. Purslane is at its best when it is plump. If you harvest after a decent rain or in the cooler part of the day when the stems are full, you get a much better bite than if you pick it when it is stressed and thin. Same plant, different eating experience. If mobility is limited, purslane is easy to snip into a bowl from a stool or kneeling pad because it forms little mats. You are not reaching overhead or hauling anything heavy. A pair of scissors does the job. The budget version is, again, almost zero. Scissors, a bowl, water to rinse. Compare that to the cost of buying boxed salad greens in the middle of summer when they are tired before you even bring them home. The third plant is one that surprises people because they have probably weeded out pounds of it without realizing what they had. Lamb's quarters. Sometimes people call it wild spinach, and that is a fair introduction, though it undersells the plant. It grows upright. The young leaves often have a dusty, silvery coating, especially near the growing tip. The leaf shape can vary a bit, but once you learn the look of the plant, it becomes easy to spot. And what matters most is this. Lamb's quarters is related to quinoa. That should tell you right away that you are not dealing with some flimsy throwaway weed. You are dealing with a plant family that knows how to make edible greens and edible seed. The leaves are excellent when young, mild, tender, easy to saute, easy to steam, easy to stir into eggs, soups, beans, or pasta. If you have ever cooked spinach and wished it had a little more backbone, lamb's quarters often gives you that. And nutritionally, it compares very well. In many cases, it beats spinach on protein, iron, and calcium. That is not hype. That is one reason older food traditions did not automatically throw it away. But the greens are only half the story. Lamb's quarters also produces seed in astonishing quantity. Tiny seeds, yes, but many of them. Thousands from a healthy stand. If you let a few plants mature, you do not just get a green. You get a grain-like food as well. That is how survival plants think. You can collect the seed heads when dry, rub and sift them, then winnow out the lighter chaff. It takes patience. I will not pretend otherwise. But patience is cheaper than a lot of the things people buy out of habit. Once cleaned, the seeds can be cooked like a small cereal, added to porridge, or ground into flour to stretch baking or thicken soups. A man I knew in eastern Ohio used to leave a patch of lamb's quarters along the back of his garden every year. His wife cooked the young leaves in spring and early summer. Then, by late season, he was shaking seed heads into a bucket. He said the plant gave twice. That was his phrase, gives twice. Once in leaf, once in seed. That is exactly the kind of logic you want in a zero-input system. The biggest mistake people make with lamb's quarters is tearing all of it out at the same stage. Do not do that. Take some while it is young and tender. Then, deliberately leave a few of the strongest plants to mature. That gives you fresh greens now and seed later. It also gives you next year's volunteers if you do not panic and strip the ground clean. Another mistake is waiting until the plant is old and fibrous, then judging it harshly. Young growth is where the best eating is. Once hot weather bears down and the stems toughen, the the texture changes. You can still cook it, but it is not the same experience. Here is the unexpected trick with lamb's quarters. You can harvest the growing tips repeatedly, almost the way you pinch basil, and the plant will often branch and keep giving you tender side growth for a while. That buys you a longer leaf window before it commits fully to seed. And if your knees complain, this plant is kind to you. It grows upright. You can clip the upper portions while standing. No crawling around. No delicate digging. A bucket in one hand and pruners in the other will handle most of the job. Cost matters here too. A bag of quinoa is not cheap. A box of fresh spinach is not cheap either, especially if you keep buying it every week. Lamb's quarters is standing there offering you something from both worlds if you will only recognize it. The fourth plant is easy to overlook because it looks small, delicate, almost ornamental in a quiet way. Wood sorrel. People often mistake it for clover at first glance because of the little leaf clusters. But wood sorrel usually has heart-shaped leaflets, and once you taste it, the confusion ends immediately. It is lemony, bright, sharp, clean. That tang comes from oxalic acid, and that means two things. First, the flavor is what makes the plant valuable. Second, this is not a bulk green. This is a seasoning green. A little goes a long way. And that is not a weakness. That is a role. If you are building a real food system, you need more than calories. You need more than volume. You need flavor, freshness, appetite, and variety. Wood sorrel does that job beautifully, especially because it grows where many classic vegetables do not. It is a shade plant. That is the key. It often turns up under trees, near foundations, beside paths, along north-facing fences, and in those awkward, half-lit corners that gardeners keep trying to force into production. Lettuce may fail there. Tomatoes will certainly hate it. Peppers will do almost nothing. But wood sorrel may settle in just fine. That makes it useful in a very practical way. It turns partial shade from dead space into harvestable space. You can sprinkle a handful into salad. You can chop it over fish. You can tuck it into egg dishes. You can stir it into cold potatoes or grain salads where you would otherwise squeeze a lemon. It brings brightness without a trip to the store. One woman I knew used to send her grandson under the maple tree with a little bowl when they were having fish on Friday. He would gather wood sorrel, and she would scatter it over the top. That simple habit took a useless patch of shade and gave it a regular place at the table. The common mistake is trying to turn wood sorrel into a giant pile of greens. That misses the point. This is not your skillet green. This is your bright note, your tart edge, your wild garnish with real nutritional value, including vitamin C. And in a survival frame, that matters. Fresh, sour greens were prized for a reason long before anybody used fancy nutrition language. People knew they helped break the monotony of stored food and brought back something the winter table lacked. Here is the unexpected trick. If you harvest wood sorrel in the cooler part of the day and rinse it gently, the flavor stays sharper and the leaves hold better. In heat, it can go limp fast. Treat it like a delicate herb, not like a sack of collards. If you have mobility limits, wood sorrel can even be encouraged in containers or shallow trays in dappled shade, close to where you can reach it. You do not have to crawl under a shrub if that is hard on your back. The cost is next to nothing. The value is in using a place on your property that otherwise gives you no food at all. The fifth plant is one of the most misunderstood residents of the American yard: clover. For many years, clover was a normal part of a lawn. Then lawn culture changed, and suddenly people were taught to see it as a flaw. That was a bad trade. Because clover is not just a filler plant. It is a working plant. Its roots partner with bacteria that help capture nitrogen from the air and make some of it available in the soil. In plain English, clover helps feed the ground. It is a little nitrogen factory running quietly below your feet. Now, I do not want to overpromise. Clover is not a magical substitute for every fertility need in a heavy-feeding vegetable bed. Tomatoes still take what they take. Corn still takes what it takes, but clover absolutely contributes. It protects soil from baking. It softens the look and function of bare spots. It feeds pollinators. And when mowed or clipped and left in place, It returns organic matter to the system. That is a lot from one humble plant. And yes, clover is edible too. The young leaves can go into salads in modest amounts or be cooked with other greens. The blossoms can be used fresh, dried for tea, or added here and there for color and mild sweetness. Red clover in particular has a long history in herbal use. I leave the health claims modest, but the practical value is real. The real surprise with clover is not that it can be eaten. It is that people spend money on nitrogen fertilizer while killing a plant that helps them with nitrogen for free. That is expensive nonsense. A tidy lawn mindset has blinded a lot of people to function. If you want every square inch uniform, then yes, clover looks like rebellion. But if you want a property that works, clover looks like intelligence. You can use it in paths between beds, under fruit trees, in orchard strips, along fence lines, or in areas where you want living cover instead of bare dirt. You can clip it before seed if you want less spread. You can let some flower if the bees need help. You can mow it high and let the clippings stay put. And here is the unexpected trick. If you are trying to reduce fertilizer use, clover clippings around hungry plants can act as a light feeding mulch while also shading the soil. Not a miracle, not a complete program, but a practical step that stacks functions. A retired neighbor of mine reseeded part of his backyard with white clover after getting tired of paying for lawn fertilizer. He said the best part was not even the savings. It was that the yard stayed greener through dry spells, the bees came back, and he stopped fighting a losing battle with thin grass on poor soil. That is what happens when you work with plant character instead of against it. For older gardeners, clover is especially friendly because it asks so little. It stays low. It covers ground. It does useful work while you are inside having coffee. You do not have to hover over it. And the budget signal here is obvious. A bag of synthetic fertilizer every year adds up. Clover doing part of that work does not. The sixth plant is the one I would never ignore in late winter and early spring. Chickweed. This is the plant that closes the hungry gap. That phrase matters. The hungry gap is the stretch of time when stored food is running low. Last year's roots are tired. Canned goods are getting repetitive. And the main garden still has almost nothing to offer. In Zone 6, that can start feeling real in late winter. In colder zones, it may slide later. In milder zones, it may come earlier and last longer. But the problem is the same. There is a stretch when the pantry feels thin and the beds are not ready. Chickweed steps into that gap. It comes on in cool weather, often very early, sometimes while the rest of the garden still looks asleep. It forms soft mats of small green leaves and tender stems, and when you find a healthy patch before heat toughens it up, it is one of the best fresh foods of the season. That is why I call it a spring rescue green. Its taste is mild, gentle, clean, easy to mix with other greens. If you know somebody who says wild foods always taste aggressive, chickweed is often the plant that changes their mind. It does not come at you like mustard. It does not ask you to prove yourself. It just gives you freshness when freshness is scarce. And nutritionally, early greens matter more than people think. After a winter of starch, preserved food, and whatever was left in storage, a bowl of living green food does something for both the body and the appetite. The mistake with chickweed is waiting until it gets old or until it is convenient. By then, the weather may have changed, flowering may be advanced, and the texture may be past its best. Chickweed rewards attention. When it is young, clip it. Wash it well. Eat it fresh or wilt it very lightly. Here is a practical trick. If you harvest with scissors and leave the lower growth, chickweed often gives you another flush before hot weather shuts it down. Pulling the whole plant wastes that chance. And here is something else worth knowing. Chickweed often grows in places that are easy to reach, along bed edges, beside cool season beds, near the house where the microclimate stays a touch milder. That makes it useful for gardeners who are not eager to trek across wet ground in March. A woman in her 70s once told me chickweed was the first thing every spring that made her feel the garden was feeding her again. Not promising to feed her, feeding her. That distinction is important. A seed packet is a promise. Chickweed in March is lunch. If your mobility is limited, this is also one of the easiest wild greens to work with from a raised edge, a low stool, or a container side patch. And because it shows up when temperatures are cool, the job itself is easier on the body than hauling hose around in summer heat. The budget version is nearly invisible because there is barely anything to buy. Scissors, a colander, water. That is about it. Now step back and look at the pattern. Dandelion gives you leaves, flowers, and root. Purslane gives you heat-proof greens and water-storing stems. Lamb's quarters gives you spinach-like leaves and a seed crop. Wood sorrel gives you bright flavor and shade. Clover gives you food, pollinator support, cover, and living nitrogen. Chickweed gives you the first real green food of the year. That is not random. These are pioneer plants. They are built for disturbance, built for neglect, built for weather swings, poor soil, open ground, and the kinds of imperfect conditions real properties actually have. They do not wait for you to create perfection before they perform. That is why they matter in a survival garden. Because resilience is a crop. You can grow for beauty, you can grow for yield, you can grow for market value. All of that has its place. But if you want a property that can still feed you when food prices jump, when rain gets erratic, when your knees will not let you work like they used to, or when supply chains do what they have done more than once in recent years, then you need plants that are already adapted to stress. That is what these weeds are. They are the opposite of fragility. And that brings me to the part modern yard culture does not like to admit. A lot of people are spending hundreds of dollars to erase a free, nutritious, drought-tolerant ecosystem in order to maintain a fragile green carpet that demands constant rescue. They buy products to kill resilient food. Then they buy other products to replace the functions those plants were providing. They kill clover, then buy nitrogen. They kill dandelion, then buy greens. They ignore purslane, then buy supplements. They mow chickweed, then buy spring lettuce in a plastic box. That is not efficiency. That is confusion. I am not saying you throw out every bed, every lawn plan, or every cultivated crop. I am saying a smart gardener learns to see value before reaching for control. Some weeds truly are a problem in the wrong place. Some are invasive. Some are not worth encouraging. But these 6 deserve a second look before they get condemned out of habit. If you are thinking, all right, but what do I actually do this week? Here is the practical answer. Pick one corner of your property that has not been sprayed. Walk it slowly. Learn the 6 plants in that space. Not 20 plants, 6. Mark where each one grows. Notice who likes sun. Notice who likes shade. Notice which one shows up first in spring and which one hangs on in heat. Take a notebook if that helps. Sketch the patch. Write the date. Write what stage the plants are in. This is the kind of simple record that makes you better every single season. Harvest with scissors, not brute force when possible. Take dandelion leaves young, before flowering. Take flowers fresh and open. Save root digging for fall. Take purslane when the stems are plump and tender. Take lamb's quarters early, but leave a few strong plants for seed. Use wood sorrel as a bright accent, not a bulk green. Keep clover where it helps the soil, and clip it for mulch if you need a use for the growth. Take chickweed early, while the stems are soft and the plant still tastes like spring. That is not complicated. It is a system. And it is a system that respects cost, weather, and the body of the gardener. The budget version costs almost nothing. A pair of scissors, a bucket, a colander, a field guide if you need one, maybe a long-handled tool if your back demands it. That is about all. The expensive version is the one people are already living with: herbicides, fertilizer, fuel, water, replacement greens, soil amendments, reseeding, more mowing, more edging, more defending of a yard that cannot feed you. The cheap version is the one nature already built and keeps rebuilding for free. Picture the result. You step outside in late winter or early spring, and chickweed is there, soft and green, before the main beds are ready. Dandelion follows with tender leaves for lunch, flowers for the pan, roots for later. Purslane carries you through the hottest part of summer, when more delicate greens have given up. Lamb's quarters fills the skillet, then later fills a jar with seed. Wood sorrel brightens the shady corners where other edibles struggle. Clover hums with bees, cools the soil, and quietly feeds the ground underneath everything else. And while the lawn model keeps demanding water, fertilizer, and protection, this rougher, humbler, more intelligent system keeps producing. That is a pantry with roots. That is a yard with memory. That is a garden that does not panic when the weather turns hard, when prices climb, or when your energy runs low. The lesson is simple. The most useful plants are not always the ones sold in bright packets. Sometimes they are the ones people try hardest to kill. And once you learn to recognize them, time your harvest, and use them well, you stop seeing your yard as a surface to manage and start seeing it as a living pantry that was trying to feed you all along. If you follow that path, the next thing to learn is when these plants are easiest to identify in each season, because the best harvest window is usually shorter than people think. And once you see those patterns clearly, you never look at spring weeds the same way again.